I'd like to call this meeting to an order. Roll call.
Mr. Dangler,
Here.
Dr. Vogt,
Here.
Mrs. Wittes,
Here.
Dr. Selly,
Here.
Mr. Vieira.
I'm here.
I hereby certify this meeting has been published in the newspaper and adequate electronic notice has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act and New Jersey Administrative Code Title 5, Chapter 39 Section 1.5 NJAC 5:39 1.5, notice of remote public meetings as required by law.
Thank you, Jeff. Our first discussion, tree ordinance. Nicholas Graviano. Nick?
Yes, Council President, good evening. Good evening. I distributed a draft tree preservation ordinance to the mayor and council. Obviously, the city of Long Branch is a community which recognizes trees as being a valuable resource and felt the need to provide mechanisms to, one, protect current trees, as well as to create a tree fund to plant future trees, as well as to ensure that all property developments have an adequate number of shade trees. Essentially, what I proposed was an ordinance which, one, provides certain provisions for people doing property improvements and creating standards for, one, maintaining the existing trees on the site, and two, in the event that clearing is being conducted, a certain number of trees will be provided. The ordinance allows certain exceptions for homeowners, which would allow homeowners to cut essentially one tree off the property in a 1-year period, so that your average homeowner is not encumbered by the permitting process to remove a tree for a simple project, whether it's a deck or other landscaping or property improvements. What it does do is create a mechanism where if a property developer is removing more than 50% of the trees on the site, they will be required to deposit money into a tree fund, and also will be required to maintain a minimum amount of shade trees on a square foot basis. And that square foot basis is one tree for every 2,500 square feet. It requires applicants to provide a tree preservation plan with all property improvements, which gives a description of the trees to be taken down, the method of protecting existing trees, as well as providing a tree preservation plan for the reviewing agency, which would either be the Planning and Zoning Office or the Planning and Zoning Boards. So that in a nutshell is a very brief description of the ordinance. I think it's a good step in protecting the trees of the city of Long Branch and providing that future trees be planted when others are removed.
Thank you,
Nick,
Nick.
who would be, Nick, you refer to like an administrative officer as being in charge of this program. Who typically would that be if you don't have a commission?
Well, in this circumstance, it could be a combination of the Planning and Zoning Office, the city engineer, the Department of Public Works, city agencies which could administer the tree preservation plan and ordinance.
So for example, if you're a single home residence, you use the example of building a deck and for whatever you needed to lose a tree, or the tree was diseased or whatever, who is the person who typically in that scenario would come out and make the decision?
Zoning officer.
Well,
It probably, the logical person is the zoning officer.
yeah, it would be my office, the Planning and Zoning Office.
Okay.
But that brings up a good point, Mayor. We do provide for allowances for people to remove dead or diseased trees without obtaining the zoning permit where trees are imminent danger to public safety. Someone could remove that tree without obtaining a zoning permit. So
Do they
it
have to have like a report from a tree expert in order to do that?
no,
'Cause I know
they would
some
not.
towns they do.
No, I did not propose a mechanism where someone would have to do that.
So Nick, does this mean that when our zoning permits, is that one of the questions going to be added on? Is any trees being cut down due to that, you putting up a deck or a patio or something like that?
Yes, it would certainly be something we would ask for in the zoning permit to see if there's more than one of a certain, it's called at the breast height. If it met a certain size, if they're doing more than one, then they'd have to pull a permit.
To get back to Rose's question, if they come in and tell you that the tree is dying anyway, we just take their word for it, or we will send somebody out there to look at it?
No, I would ask for a combination of pictures with the correspondence, as well as, doing a drive-by to see if the tree is diseased.
Okay, thank you.
So Nick, how does this ordinance compare to tree ordinances from other municipalities? Just what's included, what may not be included, just your kind of comparative opinion.
Well, I would say this ordinance is middle ground in terms of some municipalities have standards that are a little lighter, some have a little bit more that are intense. But I think where this ordinance does a good job is that, we have sections of the city that are more dense, more urbanized. So in those circumstances, you're not going to be able to replant a lot of trees. But we do provide a scenario where someone would have an obligation to have a shade tree in the front yard and one in the backyard. And at mature tree sizes, that's more than adequate to provide shade for a lot of the lots in the city. What it also does is for someone who has a bigger lot that proposes a removal of a lot of trees, more than 50%, it would really generate a substantial amount of money in the tree fund to provide tree planting endeavors in other parts of the city, whether it be city parks or recreational facilities or municipal properties.
Hey, Nick, what's the average size of the lot in Long Branch now? Like the average throughout the city?
Well, I would say, a lot of the lots are in that, 5,000 to 6,000 square foot range. There are a lot that are smaller than that. Obviously in Elberon and some parts of the West End, you have larger lot sizes, but the bulk of the city comprises of lots in that 5,000 to 6,000 square foot range, I would say.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Nick?
I just have one more thing. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Was this presented to the Environmental Commission at all yet? And if not, can we send them a copy of this?
I presented to you first. Everything flows through the city council, and if the council desires it to go the environmental route, that definitely I'll distribute it to them.
Okay. How does everybody else feel?
I'm okay with it.
I think that's a good idea.
Didn't they do a presentation to us though with some sort of, am I mistaken, about a year ago or so, or didn't they make a presentation talking about a tree ordinance?
Yeah, and they also they met with Nick, right? Nick, to go over what trees are,
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because part of this ordinance is specifying that all replacement trees should be trees that are native to New Jersey. The Environmental Commission did a great job of getting me a list, and I've incorporated that into the document. So any shade trees that are planted as part of this plan will be native species.
Nick, if you don't mind, just before we close it out, would you mind giving like two scenarios? So let's say you had a scenario where there was new development and they wanted to clear out a bunch of existing trees. What process would they would have to go through? Like if you could just take us through it. Or the other would be, let's say somebody wanted to remove one tree. I think you said it would be allowable one tree a year or one tree every 3 years, but let's say there was a second tree. Like, can you give me those 2 or 3 scenarios just so we can kind of understand the process if you were a homeowner or a single family, doing building a new single family home from scratch on an undeveloped property?
Certainly, Mayor. In the first scenario where you're building a new single family home on a property, We would request the tree inventory with the application. That would specify the quantity and species of trees on the property. If the applicant was removing more than 50% of the trees of a certain size, then they would be eligible to contribute to the tree fund. So if you had I'll use round numbers to make it easy. So if you had a 10,000 square foot lot and you were removing more than 50% of the trees on the lot, you would have to contribute $5,000 to the tree fund, as well as replant shade trees at a rate of 1 shade tree per every 2,500 square feet.
And in a much smaller scenario?
In a smaller scenario where someone needed to take down a tree for a deck, we would ask them on the zoning permit how many trees they're going to be removing. If it's 1 tree, that's fine. And then we would just process the zoning permit as normal.
So but Nick, if it was 3 trees, so now I'm going to expand my deck and I'm going to take 3 trees down. So what does the homeowner pay then?
That at that point, we would see if the homeowner had the prerequisite number of trees on the property, which would be the 1 per 2,500 square feet, and we would take it from there.
Oh, so if they had 1 tree for 2,500 square feet, then they wouldn't have to do anything?
Right.
Well, it's not to pay the $500 administrative fee?
That would be up to council. I would recommend, keeping fees reasonable for the average homeowner.
And I only see that was the fee that we
Yeah.
had in here, so that's something council might want to take a look at, because that might be a circumstance where somebody comes in, files an application because they're taking down more than 1 tree, but it turns out that after we look at it, they don't really need one. So we should just talk about, I would want somebody to have to pay the $500 fee to find out only that they really didn't need a permit.
Right.
And I think, Anita, to your point, I think we sent some of the various, couple of towns. Those fees seem to vary town to town. So I think, Nick, you're suggesting we would, as the council would determine what those fees would be, right?
Correct.
Do we have to do that today, or are we talking about it?
Not if you're going to send it to the environmental commission. I think everybody could take a look at it and then we can get their comments back, and maybe we'll look at it administratively and make some more of a recommendation based upon other fees and other jurisdictions. If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
sounds good. I don't really be hard on the homeowner. You know what I mean? Because they've been here forever with us, or the new ones welcome, you know what I mean? So we got to consider that, that's all.
It's not unusual, by the way, to exempt single family lots out of these ordinances completely when you're talking about an individual homeowner. Laura, I don't know whether or not you can jump in on that, but some of the tree ordinances how do other tree ordinances handle just a single family lot? Somebody's going to expand their deck.
I mean, generally, I will say it's relatively consistent with how this is crafted. We may want to increase so that maybe an average homeowner can take out more than 1 tree a year. Maybe it's 2 or 3. And really what becomes critical in other municipalities is the replacement. So sometimes based upon size of the tree or maturity of the tree, they may require a different replacement requirement. So I think it's fair in this instance that we're doing an analogy of the single family homes property and what trees currently exist on the property.
Yeah, Laura, that's a good point. And just so everybody knows, one of the reasons why I strayed away, in a lot of other municipalities I worked at, if you had a very large tree, you would be, you would have to plant, 5 to 10 replacement trees.
Right.
But, in our scenario, we don't have lots large enough to accommodate that many trees. So that's why I felt that the tree per square footage basis was a good threshold. So if you have one of the smaller lots in the center of town, you have your 2 shade trees. And then if you have a bigger lot in other portions of the town, you'll be able to provide more based on the lot size.
So
All right.
how are we going to make those determinations? Could we ask the environmental group to come back with some recommendations, or Nick, could you give recommendations on some of those guidelines?
You're talking about recommendations on the fees or recommendation on no,
Yeah.
the fees is probably something we should do administratively because we have to make a determination. Remember, this can't be a tree tax. So we have to make a judgment as to, cost for replacement, and then we have to make a judgment as to what it costs to administer it. That's really not that's really an administrative issue.
And one of the things you may want to consider there is doing it based upon number of trees. So if, one person's taking down 2 trees, they become subject to this. $500 is a lot of money for you to pay on top of removal of the tree. We have to look at the cost it will actually take to process it, but essentially you could probably lower that substantially if it's, maybe under 5 trees. I think the purpose of this ordinance is to provide something, because what I've seen is we don't really have anything on the book. So I think it's important to have something in place. And we can certainly look at some of the surrounding towns and fees. I know some towns I'm in are as low as $25, to be perfectly honest with you. It's strictly an application fee. It's not something that the town is trying to, I don't want to say it's not something that's cost generative, but it's imploring people to come in and actually get the permit so that we're ensuring, one, trees are taken down safely, and replanted as necessary.
And so what you may want to consider, and we'll talk about it internally, is a different fee for, there's new construction. That's a whole different, that goes in one bucket. But what we're talking about now is a homeowner who decides that they want to clear their backyard because they want to build a pool, and they have to remove 3 trees. I don't want, you could be in a circumstance, if you apply this literally, that it's $500 for the application and then $300 a tree into the tree removal fund. So you remove 3 trees and it costs you $1,400 to us. So, you may want to consider treating that scenario different than, because if you make the fees too high, what'll happen is that people won't comply with it. People will be ignoring it. If not, I think that's what you have to do.
So you're
Yeah, definitely.
saying,
And just so everybody knows, this was really, developer focused, new building, new lot focused. We could definitely get into, the nitty gritty for the other smaller scale scenarios.
yeah, that's what I was gonna just say to prevent people from coming in and plowing down entire lots and not, putting any trees back or leaving some of them on that should be left on those lots rather than taking everything down. So, so you're gonna get back to us on the fees and everything you're saying?
Yes, and I guess we'll do that in conjunction with sending it also off to the Environmental Commission for their review. And then when it comes back, we'll have a recommendation with regards to fees, and then you can decide when and how you want to move it.
Great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Anybody else? Good?
Mario, can I just make one comment?
Sure.
I just want to point out to the council, under exemptions, it's a really, and Nick, this is a great chapter that you included, that it gives us the ability to respond quickly and with our own personnel to issues of dangerous trees or disease or damaged trees. In my former life, we had a much more bureaucratic process that often would handcuff people from getting rid of trees that were a danger to their home or that were uprooting sidewalks and creating hazards. This gives us the ability with our own staff's review to take quicker action. And I can tell you from my experience, that's a great thing to be able to do that in a reasonable amount of time. We used to, it would go for months before we could get an answer. So Nick, it's a good thing. Just I want council to be aware that this gives us the ability to act quickly on these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. All right, then that's it. And we'll move on to our second discussion, single-use plastic ban. Louis, Reno?
So I sent council a memo. Obviously, there's now been a pretty comprehensive state law that's that was adopted. I laid out for you the various differences between our ordinance and the state law. The state law fully takes effect in May of 2022. Probably the two biggest differences between your ordinance and the state law is that the state law now goes to single-use paper bags, which yours does not, and that'll just become the state law. And the state law doesn't deal with plastic utensils, which you do. The real question is whether or not we go back and take our ordinance and revise it so it's consistent with the state law. Though, if you didn't have an ordinance, the state law would apply. But it's whether or not you want to change it to just maintain some of those elements that I just discussed. You obviously can't allow paper bags once the state doesn't allow them.
I'd like to make a comment if I could. I got a call from Michael Sirianni, who is the director of the chamber. And he said that several of the merchants were upset. First of all, because there was very little advertisement about this, that it was going to become effective so soon. They also wanted to know if it could be pushed back. And I think I just heard Lou say there would be some time later on that this could be. I think we should listen to what they had to say. They're unhappy about the paper bags. They're unhappy about some of the other different things that are in this ordinance. They're not against it, but they just think that we need more time, and certainly the city should give a little bit more advertisement and publicity to it. Okay.
Yes, that sounds very well. Thank you, Mary Jane.
So the ordinance was adopted in January of 2019.
Right.
And it takes effect, and I apologize, I believe it takes effect at the beginning of next year. I don't have it in front of me. The state law takes effect a year from May. So there'll be a period of time where our ordinance will be in effect and before the state law goes into effect. So I don't, the answer is I don't know what was done to advertise it or not, but we adopted it, and obviously there were newspaper stories at the time, but.
Well, Lou, one of the options is for us to just entirely repeal ours.
Correct.
Right? And just go
And
with
let
the
the state law go into effect in May of 2022.
Yeah. So Mary Jane, did Mike, was he aware of that? Do you know that the state one doesn't go into effect until May 2022? Mary Jane, I don't know if you heard me on that.
I'm listening, but I couldn't quite hear what you said.
If Long Branch, if we repeal our ordinance, then it just defaults to the state, and theirs doesn't go into effect until May 2022. So I didn't know if Mike was aware of that.
I think ours went into effect much earlier, and they were upset about it because they didn't think that they themselves, the merchants, had enough time to get ready because of the pandemic.
Mhm.
So I personally think we should give them some consideration.
I agree with you, Mary Jane. With the pandemic, we definitely got to give them some more time, or we do like Anita said. We recall ours and take the state over. Let's see what the rest of the council feels.
Well, I mean, let me ask you this. Before you make the decision right now, do you want to review both sides of this, or did you want to make a decision right now? Mr. Reno, do you have a suggestion there?
I don't. Obviously, this is something that council has to decide. The ordinance has not taken effect yet. Our ordinance will not take effect until January 1st, 2021, excuse me. So I just wanted to go back and take a look. The answer is that you'll go, if you repeal yours, you'll go another summer where you'll be able to use plastic bags and all of those things. I don't really have a recommendation much either way, though you may want to consider, and this is just my suggestion, is dialing back your ordinance to be consistent with the state law, and then letting it go into effect. Maybe it goes effect a year early. I don't know if you want, you will have effectively, you passed it in 2019, so you will have missed the summer of 19, the summer of 20. Now we're talking about missing the summer of 21 also. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What if we were to, use these state guidelines, but rather than wait until May of 2022, why can't we give the restaurants and, businesses in Long Branch 6 more months and then adopt the resolution then? Why do we have to wait a whole nother year and 5 months?
So, do you want to amend this? So, like I said, the one thing that will not be banned under the state law that is banned under yours is the plastic utensils.
Right.
So, do you want to leave that in, or you want to take it out, conform us to the state law, and just make your ordinance effective 2021, and then come 2022 it goes away because it's a state law?
Personally, I'd like to conform it with the state, but include the utensils and give them 6 more months because of the COVID situation, and then put it into effect. I don't think we should wait another year and 5 months. I mean, we're living on an ocean, and I think it's important that we start, watching how we use plastics and leave them on the beaches and things like that. So I think, and we have George on here. George, were the businesses notified about this ordinance?
I know it was publicized when you took action on it. There were local articles. It was a long lag period. And Mike Sirianni had reached out to me early in the year, and you did have a workshop discussion, I'm going to guess around April, about this, about the possibility of delaying it. So we did discuss, I don't know if you all recall that. And quite frankly, who knew this pandemic was going to continue as the way it is? And at that time, I checked with some other municipalities that had a similar ordinance, and theirs was supposed to take effect in June or July. They were pushing them back to the effective date that we have in place. So I think the consensus of council at that time was the people that are pushing it back and giving ample time, or what they felt was ample time, was consistent with what we had in place. So you chose not to take any action. Unfortunately, the pandemic rages on, the hardships on our businesses continues. And so that's why now it's an issue again. The one thing is businesses are aware, that's why they're raising this. So I think there's a general awareness in our business community that this is coming at them. I get it. This is a really difficult time for people to have to adjust to new requirements. I understand the concern. And then in the meantime, the state passed their statute, which really gives you pause as to whether or not we want to supersede that or let the entire state be consistent and let every town proceed in the same manner, right? It's tough. It's a tough call.
So again, which is basically why I referred it to Mr. Raynone. Again, do you want to make a decision right now, or do you want to, does it really matter if you wait till the next meeting and we can research what in fact others are doing? Some of the example, in other words, just the dynamic of the change here in the last couple of months. That's a question.
Bill, do you have anything to say, Bill? You're nice and quiet today.
Yeah, I don't quite buy that they didn't have enough time because of the pandemic. If we want to wait until the state law comes into effect, I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with leaning on the pandemic as why you're not ready for the single-use plastic, if in fact we did announce it a year ago. a year ago, next, I guess, I think it is next month. So if we want to give them an extension, I am okay with give the ordinance an extension for several months. I'm okay with it, but not just because of the pandemic. That, I don't think that has anything to do with getting the plastic bags. I mean, the single-use bag ordinance.
The other thing that I know that happened, for instance, Atlantic Highlands, I think that they moved, I think George is right, they moved their date back because part of the issue that they found was in a scenario where, leaving aside the stuff that happens at the beach and, at the food stores where you would normally go in, bring your bags, go in, shop and take them out and load up your car. People were getting, curbside delivery and those kind of things. And plastic bags became almost kind of a necessity. That all now has kind of gone away. And that's why, for instance, Atlantic Highlands, I think at the beginning of this month, or maybe the beginning of November, their ban went back into effect.
I think we should go pretty much what Rose said, my opinion. And we should make a decision because we can't just depend on the other towns. We got to make our own decisions too. And, maybe give them like a 6-month leeway, like Mary Jane said, like Michael Sirianni asked for. They are aware of it because if they weren't aware of it, they wouldn't be complaining about it. So they are aware of it. And
I agree with that.
I don't want to really be harsh about it because of the epidemic like we're going through, but give the 6-month leeway like Rose asked for. I think that's what we should do and decide and then get it over with and take it out of the board.
I agree with that also.
So I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So adding 6 months to this would make it through June. So do you, through June 30th. So do you want to pick a date? And because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extend the grace period for the enforcement of the ordinance. When I say I'm going, the way I would draft it is extend the grace period from December 31st, 2020 to a date. My suggestion is you pick, if you're thinking about starting it before the summer, you pick May 1st.
So why don't we pick
June
Memorial
30th.
Day as the start of the summer season?
Can I just ask once more? Again, I realize that Mary Jane mentioned this and this is the chamber. And again, I'm not suggesting one thing or the other, but do you want to, in other words, this has been ongoing for a year. Do you just want to make that decision right now and say, okay, well, is it going to be May 1st or June 1st or whatever? Or do you want to do a little research within our own community as well as other communities and make that decision between now and the next meeting? Or did you want to just make it right now? I'm just throwing that out again.
Well, the ordinance we have is supposed to go into effect January 1st. So I think we need to discuss it tonight and make a decision. And I would prefer to have this in effect before the summer starts. So if we have to do Memorial Day, like Anita said, then maybe that's a good point and, have it effective that day.
And once again, the only reason why I don't know that Memorial Day is the day is because people have to, if people are stock up with, it's the beginning of the season, right? And the season, of course, started earlier this year than it has in the past. But when people start opening their places up for the summer, they shouldn't be opening them up with styrofoam containers and then magically on Memorial Day change over. They should be up and going before because they have to figure out what they're going to do about their utensils and those kind of things also. So that's all I'm saying. As a practical matter, it's not going to become a big deal until Memorial Day, but you may want to make it something. I mean, that's not the day you want it. Memorial Day. Is not
that's a good point.
I think that's a good point. And May 1st, which we're extending it 5 months to get them ready. There'll be those who pretend they don't know, or maybe they really don't know, but certainly the word would get out before the Memorial Day weekend or before the summer officially starts, and everybody should be on board and prepared.
That's
Again,
good.
they asked for the 5 to 6 months, and we're giving them if we agree, we're giving them the 5 months to get ready.
And, you know, my other thought is, and just, you know, we're in executive session, so we can talk about this a little bit. My other thought is that from an enforcement point of view, it's effective May 1st. Now our inspectors go out to these businesses on May 1st and say, hey, by the way, you know, you can't use those containers anymore. And you haven't shut them down on Memorial Day weekend, right? You gotta, so it gives us almost like a soft opening, if you know what I'm saying. It gives us the ability to go out and connect with the business community and say, by the way, you can't use this stuff anymore. And they, you know, I'm sorry, and they'll get what they have to get, so that it's, rather than walk out on Memorial Day and go to somebody who has, you know, who's got a hot dog stand, and you walk out and, you know, take all of their plastic utensils away on the biggest weekend of the, you know, the beginning of the season. So that's my other thought, practical matter to it.
If I could, I think, respectfully, I think we're still in the workshop.
Right.
We're not in
Yeah.
executive session yet.
No, but what I'm saying, and that's okay. And
Okay.
I'm okay in saying that in public too. It doesn't
All right,
bother me.
that's
I think
fine.
that's,
Thank
I
you,
think
Bill.
that's one of those things that, that would give us the ability to do that also, to ramp
Okay.
up into the enforcement.
So are you going to take a consensus or?
Yeah, why don't we take a consensus? See what council feels. You guys want to do May 1st?
Yes.
I'm okay with May 1st.
I'm also okay with May 1st. Anita,
Yep, I'm okay.
Mary Jane?
Yeah,
All right, we got it.
Okay,
Mary,
so
if I could-
I'll prepare an ordinance for it to be introduced at next 2 weeks meeting. And then, well, actually it'll be the first meeting in January, right?
Yes,
First meeting in January, and then we'll adopt it at the second meeting in January.
okay. Go ahead,
Mary,
Anita.
if I could just make one more suggestion, and that's picking up on Mike making that comment. I just got an email, like I'm sure many of us got from the chamber. You know, they're looking for speakers. And Jake, I don't know if we do this regularly or, but, you know, maybe if, you know, twice a year or something like that, we get on the agenda to do some updates like this. That would be a good PR move and a good way of informing the business community and, you know, just building relationships there. So,
That's a great idea, Anita.
Mario, could I say one more thing, please?
Sure, Mary Jane, go ahead.
I think regardless of what we do with whatever, I think that we should have more publicity, and it's just not, I mean, we know about it. John mentioned a year ago. Yes, we know about it, but everybody's got everything else on their mind and they're not really thinking about it. So let's give them a chance. I think maybe we could do something on the what's our website and remind people. That's all I want. It's just more publicity. I know people are aware of it, but they're not really aware of it. They know of it, but they don't know anything about it. Okay, I'll shut up.
No, you're
just
good.
just to kind of bring some closure to my suggestion, do we want to do that, to reach out to the chamber and say, you know, we'd love to do a presentation, not only on this, but on a few things that, you know, are pertinent to the business community? Or because if we just say it's not going to happen. So I'm just trying to see if we want to act on it or not.
I mean, Anita, it wouldn't be a bad idea, like maybe one of the breakfasts or one of their meetings, you know,
Right.
some one of us over there mention and listen, so-and-so is gonna take effect 3 months from now. Don't forget about your consumers and your restaurants and your stores and stuff like that. All right, that's probably for further discussion, but the decision was made already. Okay, we'll close that one up. Now, the discussion on the boardwalk banners, that's on me. I've been approached by a few people on the boardwalk, and with our banners that say, welcome Long Branch, a friendly city, or Long Branch was established so-and-so. They would like to see every certain maybe 10 or 8 poles, have maybe a little American flag on the pole. It doesn't have to be everyone or anything. I mean, maybe like the entrance to the beaches, or every 10 poles have an American flag. So I told my people that I spoke to over there, and I would ask the council here, see what your opinion is.
I'm okay with it as long as they're not plastic.
No, I talked to Stan about this already. It's gonna be the same fabric as the other ones.
Mhm.
It's gonna look like exactly the other ones, except instead of saying, Long Branch, welcome to Long Branch, a friendly city, or established so-and-so, it will just be an American flag. And it wouldn't be next to each other, it would be like apart, like maybe 1,000 feet apart from each other or so, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it wouldn't, so it just breaks it up a little bit.
So I like the idea, and some of the flags have taken a beating and need to be replaced anyhow. So might be a chance to be able to do it sooner rather than later, but I like the idea.
Thank you. Bill?
I'm okay with it. Good idea.
And Mary Jane?
Yes.
All right, thanks. That was a quick one. All right. Anybody else have any questions about that? Good. All right, review of the regular meeting agenda. Does anybody have questions?
No,
No questions.
no.
All right, well then I need a motion to close.
Motion to close.
So moved.
Second,
Mr. Dangler,
Yes.
Dr. Vogt,
Yes,
Mrs. Wittes,
yeah.
Dr. Selly,
Yes.
Mr. Viera.
Yes.
It's 5-0, meeting is adjourned.
All right. I need a motion to adopt a resolution to go into executive session for the following items: attorney-client privilege, public safety, COVID-19 update, George Jackson, public meeting notices, Lou Rayno, contract negotiation, Transit Village, Lou Rayno and Nicholas Graviano, abandoned properties, Nicholas Graviano, Green Acres, Jake Jones and Laura Newman, the pool, Louis Rayno.
So moved.
Second,
Mr. Dangler,
Yes.
Dr. Vogt,
yes.
Mrs. Wittes,
yes.
Dr. Selly,
Yes.
Mr. Viera.
Yes.
5